In this video, we'll be going over the basics of animation using a puck exercise to animate out some moving pucks and manipulate them further using the graph editor and blocking in the animations as we go. So the first takeaway I want to talk about this assignment is, as I talk about kind of what's going on here, is you will be working in what we call passes. There might be some different phrases, different terms from other animators, but generally I advise when you're doing digital animation that you work in passes, which is just you kind of do something and then you kind of come back and do different parts of it as you go. You don't want to try to work doing every single thing in the scene, animating every single frame as you go by. Generally, that what you'll discover is that that's time consuming, and as you make mistakes and have to go back, then you have more things to change and edit around. So I don't advise that you do that. We'll be talking about a concept of working in passes as we go through here. The other thing we'll be talking about is a lot of refining animations through the graph editor and an introduction to that as well, and animating through observation. So this scene is a bunch of simple cylinders here. I've gone in here and I've added some bevels on the top and bottom, created a light in the scene, which I've turned off what you can see here. Created a directional light, put some shadows on. If you do not know how to do these things, I recommend watching some of the introductory videos in mine that I've included in the past. I'll include links in the description of this video, but feel free to go through there. I'll step through a few of these things, such as beveling. Beveling can be done by creating objects and selecting edges and using Control B is the quick key on them. But if I come in here, create a cylinder here, right click and hold on this and double click in edge mode, you can just hit Control B to add a bevel, and then you can manipulate the fractions and segments as you see fit up here by changing these numbers value or clicking and holding on the words and dragging left and right on them. So I did a couple bevels on these here. This is a ground plane that was extruded up and then beveled these inner edges here to give it a little more shape. These are going to be like bumpers, like pinball bumpers, and they're made of a couple different objects here. They're a cylinder that has the top part beveled, and then this like rubber bumper here is just a simple create polygon primitive torus that I created and added to it. For the bumpers, they are created and put into a group. If you're not familiar how to create a group, you can select multiple objects and do Control G on a PC or Command G on a Mac. What this will do is put them together into a object. Again, if you're not familiar with these things, I do cover them in other videos. Hopefully you are familiar with them, but I'll be sure to include links in the comments, the description area. So I have these in a group. I've created some materials on them. I've gone through and named all these things. I strongly recommend that you name your stuff as you go, especially if you're finished modeling it. You can rename things a couple different ways. You can double click on the outliner. The outliner is this icon right here on the left hand side. Then you're going to either double click on it in here, and then after that you can type a name in and hit enter, or you can change it in the channel box or attribute editor on the right hand side as well. So if you click up here, you can also change the name. This is not necessary to do while modeling, but I do recommend that you do this when you're done with the modeling step, because you sometimes will only see these things in list format, and I do recommend that you make that a practice habit that you do. Same thing with materials. Assigning materials on here is pretty straightforward. You can right click on an object and do sign existing material if you already created one, which I already made them all, or you do sign new or favorite materials from ones you create. We stuck to mostly blends and Lamberts in this project, which are good legacy shaders that you can use in this one. Again, same practice. If you have shaders on there, I do get in the habit of renaming the shaders just so you have them named as you go. Again, these are all things that we've covered, but I want to kind of reinforce them here and as I talk what I did. Other things on these materials, I kind of lightened the ambient side just a little bit so that they're not so dark on the dark side of them. And I also did the same thing, kind of the same idea for the light. If you select the light, go into the shadow property in the attribute editor, increase the shadow color, and manipulate the light however you wish. If you cannot see the light, remember, 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is textures. I don't have any textures. 7 is to preview with lights. It will show the light by default when you hit the 7 key, but it will not show shadows. You have to turn that on manually, which is this little blue icon right here. Looks like a little blue ball with a little shadow on it. It's right next to the light bulb. It's right there in that view. That's how you preview shadows in the main editor here. Okay, so let's see. Anything else here? That's pretty much everything. At least, like getting this scene set up. So working in passes, what we mean by working in passes is I have a good idea of what I want to animate here. I don't have an exact plan, step by step. And that's really kind of hard to come up with, but obviously the more complex the animation gets, the more you're going to want to do that. But I've kind of set up the scene. I'm going to visualize this puck coming in here, and I'm going to hit these pucks and move around and do those things. And because there is always a fair amount of unknown with animation, you don't want to start animating. For example, when this puck hits this one, I don't want to start going to animating this one right away. Because as I adjust the timing on this red puck, if I move it around, then it might hit this blue one at a different time, or one of these other ones at a different time. And the more time I spend on that, and just to find out I'm wrong with those keyframes, it can be moved, of course, but it's gonna cost more time. So what I recommend that you obey, and there's like a lot of animators that do this differently, but generally what you do is you block in passes, and what you should try to strive for is the things that make the largest movements first, or in this particular case, the things that affect most of the other items. So again, I'm going to animate this red puck, which is only red just to denote it on your screen here. It coming in, hitting these pucks. I'm going to worry about this red puck completely first before I worry about anything else in this scene. So let's go ahead and animate this. And now when you're creating animation, I'm going to go to the channel box right up here on the top right. When you're animating, there's lots of different ways to set keys, but I'm going to talk about two key ones here. You can select the object and move your time on the time range and hit the S key, which will set a key for all the properties over here. Now, this is fine. What you do when you hit the S key is it creates this little red box, and this denotes that you're on a keyframe and it has keyframe animation. However, in this particular case, I'm not going to really animate any of these other attributes other than translate. So we don't want to create a bunch of channels that we don't intend to use later on. Now, if you like the S key, that's fine. You just have you probably have to clean up some of your animation later. And that's really what it comes down to. Do you want to start out being clean and be a little bit slower, or do you want to clean it up later and be faster in the beginning? So it's really up to you. Personally, how I like to work is I'm going to undo my S key here. How I like to work is I like to use Shift and the corresponding tool. So in this case, I'm going to be animating translate. Translate's a W key. If I hit Shift W, it will set keys on only the translate. And I like this as well. And technically, I don't even need the translate Y, but this is a lot less than me having to clean up one property instead of seven others on top of that. So I'm gonna keyframe on translates frame 1, and you'll see that it adds just the red box to these 3. Now animation obviously needs at least 2 keyframes before we'll start doing anything. And again, just to recap in case you missed it in the previous lectures, this is down here is in frames, not seconds. Be sure that you're mindful of that, and your frame rate is dependent on what you set it at. The default in Maya is 24 frames per second, and that is fine. But if you want to change it, you can change it. It's over here on the bottom right. It's a little person running away from the gear. And if you click on this, there's again the frame rate, and there's actually one other thing. If you've never done animation in Maya before, you do need to change one of the settings. So frame rate's right here, default's 24. Some people like to change it to 30. If you have experience with other animation software, you can change it to 30. Click in here, but you can change it to a lot of different things technically. And the other thing that I consider that is a must do is you need to change the max playback speed from free, which is what it is by default, which is good for particle effect systems and things like that, but we're not going to be doing any of that here, to 24 times 1. So I recommend you change that. Thankfully, these particular settings save, so if you've done this once, you never have to do this again. So hit save, unless you want to change them or you reinstall Maya. Okay, so I've set this 24, so in this case, if I go to frame 24, this is 1 second, not 2. Some people beginners make that mistake. They think this is in terms of seconds. It's not seconds, this is frames. And technically, I seriously doubt this will be 24, but I like to work when I block in my animations. I usually work in like half seconds or seconds. And you can see I'm just going to move this roughly a second. And I'm just using the arrow keys to line this up. Don't grab by the center. It does move in all directions, and generally in this exercise, in my example at least, you're not going to animate in the Y at all. So it'll be quicker to grab the two arrows, one at a time here, down here, to get them the way you want. All right, so I positioned it. Again, always move time first, then the object, then set a key. So Shift W. So you can see, if I rewind and play this, it goes and over there. Is it right? Probably not. But the point is, what you're doing here is you're kind of getting a guesstimate of time. You're getting those keys where it's going to make contact or do certain key attributes in place first, and then another pass will go back and edit them back, to be more accurate. So there's some problems with this. I'll talk about it in a second, but I'm just going to continue making these keyframes. That way, it might be easier to see for the beginning animators here. So I'm going to go ahead and just move I moved my timeline a full second. I'm going to adjust the object, and I'm going to go ahead and put it right about here and hit Shift W. And then I'm going to repeat this. I'm going to go 72 just because I'm staying in even my patterns of a second. And then I'm going to come over here and hit my bumper thing. I'm going to place my bumper here, put on the bumper, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift W. And then my last keyframe, or not my last technically, I'm going to move it over here, 96. I'm going to hit this object, and I'm going to hit Shift W. And then I'm going to go to the very last frame, it's going to bounce off and probably ease to a rest somewhere over here, and do Shift W. Now, you can scrub on the timeline by left-clicking and holding in here and dragging back and forth. Or you can use the Vcr controls on the left-hand side. So as you see me click on these things, I'll narrate them, but just to kind of go over them real quick. From left to right on the Vcr controls, go to the beginning of the animation, go back a single frame, go back a keyframe, play backwards, play forwards, go forward a keyframe, go forward one frame, and go to the end of the animation. So if you want to ever rewind this, for example, you can just click on the far left one, go all the way back to the beginning. Now if I hit play, and you're doing this a lot, you're just going to be rewinding and playing this and seeing the keyframes here. So there is quite a few problems with this. For starters, the puck tends to accelerate, but it tends to start off slower. And then it also kind of takes these curves, almost like it's driving like a car. This is because the default, we call the tangents on the graph editor, are set to flat tangents, which make a bunch of S curves. If you've ever taken any other software, you might have heard this term before. Or ease in, ease out. It's another term that gets used a lot. They tend to be curvy lines, which are great for organic-based modeling. Not so much when you're replicating mechanical things or physics things. So we need to change that. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to come in and get our timing. And that we need to change that too, but that'll take a little bit more time. So let's go ahead and stop this, and let's open the graph editor. So if you're okay with its position, roughly, we can call this is a pass. We've finished a pass. I block in where I want this puck to hit things. I'm not going to go and animate the blue ones now yet because I still got to refine this one before I go further. So this takes a little bit of practice. But yeah, I mean, when you do anything new, you're kind of gonna establish your own way you work. But I do recommend that you kind of work in passes. All right, so my first pass is complete. I'm going to go ahead and refine this by opening up the graph editor by going to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Click on that. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a graphical representation of everything on the keyframes on the object you have selected. If you don't have an object selected, you won't see anything here. So I clicked on something else. You can see you have to have the object selected. So how this represents is we have time going horizontal and value going vertical here. It's not as important to really know the exact values. It does show them though here. If I click on this one and go to this time, and this is the X value, it's going to be 8.045, and you can see it's the same there. So it's just a visual representation of what I clicked on, which I wasn't even paying attention to the numbers as I went through. What is important you pay attention to is the directionality and the steepness of these lines. So generally what you see in here, there's a couple things, but the steeper the line is, the faster the transition is between whatever those keyframes are. And the keyframes are these little diamonds here. And this is where I clicked Shift W, Shift W, Shift W, or the S key if you're clicking the S key. So here's where the first place I clicked it, here's the second place, and so on. The steeper that line is, the more it's moving in that channel. So it's going to a positive number on the Z and a negative number on the X. That doesn't mean anything, it just means it's going positive Z and it is moving backwards in the X. So that's again, the value is kind of irrelevant, depends on what you're doing with it, but it is important to know kind of what these look like in the direction they're going, how steep they are. If you see something completely flat, for example, translate Y, and I'm just going to click over here, these are completely flat. That means there's no value change whatsoever here. Honestly, I delete these and want to save myself, just get them out of the way so they're not there. I select them and hit delete. So I just get rid of them. So I only have 2 to worry about now, and you can see we have them selected. If you see something different than mine, maybe your screen, you have a different view, like maybe it's came in and it's like over here or something. You can navigate in this window the same way you navigate in the main window. However, this is a 2D window, so there's no Alt left mouse. That doesn't do anything because it's a 2D window. But Alt middle mouse will pan, and Alt right mouse will dolly. You can also hit the F key to frame whatever you have selected, which I have nothing, so it frames everything. Or A key will frame everything, even if you have something selected. So for example, if I select these 4 over here and hit the F key, it frames to those. But if I select the A key, it frames everything. So this is a great window. You can leave it floating like this. You can also dock it if you like. I'm going to dock it down here by just dragging this from up here to where I see the blue line. And I'm docking it right below the graph editor right there. And you can see I let go. It kind of docks it right there. So, and if you want to get it out, you can just grab it right here and let go. Bring it back out. Drag it back down. There we go. Wherever you want it, or if you have, like I said, you have the luxury of having multiple monitors, you can put it on a different monitor or something like that. Okay. So now I have the graph editor here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I talked about how there's, well, at least at this point in our learning, there's 2 curves that you're going to use, tangent type curves you're going to use a lot. Flat, which is what the default is, and linear. Again, flat is really great for organic modeling, so you will use it, just this is perhaps not the best assignment for it. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to change all these to be linear. And what linear will do is it will have a much snappier response. It will bounce off things. It'll look very mechanical, and we'll go back and change some of them back to flat, but I find it easier to change everything to linear first and then go edit what we need back to flat. So again, I'm just going to drag a box around all these keyframes. We go up to tangent, linear. What it does is it will convert all of them to straight lines, and then I'm just going to go ahead and rewind and show you what this looks like as this. And you'll see it's much more snappy. The bounces are much more precise. But the end is a little bit weird. And again, I'll come back to that later. So we're going to come back and make some of them flat. Probably just one, actually. But, the rest of them will be linear. And this will be true for a lot of the stuff in this particular exercise. So how do we adjust the timing on here? And this is where now we get into the observation. So I just made them all linear. Now I'm looking. And again, time is represented horizontally. So if I want to speed something up, I would make the frames that are in that section be closer together, or which would make the lines steeper. If I want to make something slower, I would position these farther apart, which would make these lines be flatter. These curves. So if I want that first one to be faster, which I'm going to go ahead and make that faster, I can select a box, drag a box around these 2 frames, and then use the move tool. So you have to be on translate. So W key, make sure you're on it. So this one right here. If you're not, it'll try to do something different, or nothing at all. So make sure you're on the translate tool, select those keys, and I'm going to middle mouse, click and hold, and move these around. Now if you do this with nothing else, it'll move in all 4 directions. This is perhaps most likely not what you want. Generally, what you want to do is you probably mostly want to move in just one direction, left or right. So if you hold down Shift and you start dragging, it only will go in the direction you first start dragging. So in this case, if I drag left, it'll only allow it to go left and right. I can no longer go up and down. And honestly, this is perhaps what you want most of the time. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these over a bit because, again, I want to make these first frames closer, which will make these curves steeper. And what that will do is speed this up. Now, I couldn't move the first ones because I had a position already set, so I needed to move the second ones. Now, in doing that, it causes a problem, which it's going to make this much slower. And I'll show you how to not do that next time. But I left it in so you guys can see what would happen. So if you just grab one at a time, which is sometimes fine, and I hit play, the first part should be faster, but then it slows way down, and we don't want that. So what you can do is you kind of need to move all of them. So instead of moving just one, I'm going to grab all of these ones that are to the right, and I should have did this the first time like this, grab them all, but I'm going to skip the first one because I've already moved that, and I'm going to move these all, and I'm just going to eyeball. Like I said, just move them all over so they're here. Now, generally, not necessarily always, these lines will start getting farther and farther apart between the keyframes because this should be losing momentum. However, I can't say that with an absolute certainty because you might put your pucks in a different position where they're really close to each other, so that wouldn't be true in those particular cases. But if all the pucks were evenly placed, these lines would get bigger and bigger and bigger because the puck is moving slower and slower and slower. But again, in this case, I think it's easier, like I said, just to kind of guess and then go back and tweak these one at a time, and generally going from left to right as you go. So the start of the animation. That's how I tend to like to do this. I play, and then I'm going to do is slow this all down. And my plan here is I'm going to have this red puck come off screen, hit this one. It's going to get slower, and it's going to slow down with those 2 bounces. It's going to speed up a bit off this bumper because I'm imposing some sort of force on it, and it's going to hit this one, and then it's going to slow to a stop. So I'm doing a little bit of mix here to make it a little more interesting, to add a little bit of stuff in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. So let's go ahead and start with this one at a time. Just move one at a time, and it's coming on pretty fast. So let's see what we're at now. We're at frame 13. Maybe I'll go 14. Move them over 1. So slow down a little bit. And then I'm going to come ahead and slow these all back down a little bit. And you can use other tools. I tend to like the translate one myself, but technically you can scale keyframes too. I just don't want to talk about that quite yet. I tend to use that more as like an in thing where I need to make everything a bit slower or faster. I don't like to use it this early on. I tend just to prefer translate myself. So you can see I'm just grabbing those and moving it, and then I'm just going to rewind and play. It is coming in pretty fast off the thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if it did that, I would have to speed up the other ones, which, maybe that's fine. So maybe I'll speed these other ones up. I'll speed this one up a couple frames. And then it's coming over here. I'll leave that one alone because I do want it to slow down. So let's see what that looks like. Wind and play. Okay. So the relative speed is pretty good. I do want it to gain speed off that end. I think I'm going a little too fast overall. So I think I might slow it down a little bit more. Because that looks pretty good right there. But like I said, I want it to gain some speed off of this one. So maybe I'll come in here, stop my animation. Oh, maybe I'll leave it alone. Have it hit this. And I want it to speed up off of this one. Because that's going to hit this bumper, and I'm going to make the thing, animate this, doing like a pinball bumper. to do this. So I want it to gain speed. So what that would be is between these two frames, these would need to be closer. Make it much more extreme because if you generally want to err on the side of exaggeration, but let's rewind and let's take a look. Play, boom, boom, boom. Still not fast enough in my opinion. So I thought it was way too slow. I thought I took some frames. So I'm gonna again grab these last two. I'm gonna get these lines again. They're getting steeper here. These lines are getting steeper. Rewind, play. Boom, boom. Faster, and then yeah, that's noticeably faster. And you know what? Just why not? Just a couple more. I tend to like to go overboard and then dial it back. I'd always suggest that you err on the side of too much. If you're too subtle, then it's not noticeable. That's the effect. Viewers might think that's just a mistake. So err on the side of going overboard, and then dial back as you needed. Okay, so I like what it's doing. It's a little bit of a big push. You know, what I think I might do is I might position its placement a little bit different because the way it's hitting. I don't know if I care for that. So if you ever want to change the placement of something, that's you overriding the keys. Now you can either navigate to the keys by doing it in the graph editor or here, or don't forget your little keyframe VCR controls here, the ones that point to the little orange lines. These are go by keyframe. These are great too because then you can guarantee you're on the keyframe. So go to the keyframe that you want, and I'm gonna move this a little bit. I want its position to be a little bit different. And I'm going to overwrite that key, Shift W. And then what I'm going to do is I want the last one. I want it to go further. I want it to go over here more because I wanted to give it more room because I'm doing it so fast. The only reason I'm doing this is I want it to give it more room to lose energy. And this is just me making a choice on this. And that's what the freedom of working in passes does. Is you can kind of do this as you go. And kind of change some things. So you can see I overwrote those two keyframes. Sometimes you might have to go back and move the keyframes around as well. Honestly, this is looking pretty good. I like what it's doing, and I'm going to call this good in terms of the speed approximately. So let me add a little bit more. And the only thing is we need this to, when it ends, to come to an ease to a stop, which it's not doing. So again, I'm going to select this puck, go to the very last frame here, and what this is it's set to linear, so it just kind of goes evenly and then stops. And that's what we did. We set them all to linear. So the very last frame, we want this to be flat because it's losing its energy. It is an ease out. So we want to select these last two frames, go tangent, flat. I'm going to click on flat, and then you go. Now you can, if you need to come in here and break lines or mess with lines, like we can mess with these curves. Just be careful if you do that, because if you mess with it too much, you're going to cause weird things. For example, if I grab this curve, and then what happens is you can now select a handle. So select a curve, then select a handle, then I can middle mouse and drag this handle around. You can see that I can mess with that handle. And did it. You also, if you don't want to mess with both sides, you see that's messing with both sides there. You can also break the tangents on these. That's done simply by clicking on this little V icon right here with them selected, and it will break the tangents. The lines will change into dotted lines, which now if I come in here and drag these, they're individually movable, so you don't affect the other side. And so if you wanted to, for example, what would be more accurate for this thing is this should have a much more mirrored response and then kind of curve as it goes to the end. And that would look something like this roughly. So kind of like this. I gotta zoom out a bit. So it's subtle, but it's different. But you gotta be careful you don't zoom like this. If I do this, what's gonna happen is it's going to go in one direction. Remember, this is a change of direction as it goes back down. So technically this thing's gonna do like a little hook or a curve. I have no idea. Let's take a look. It's going to go a little hook. And there it goes. It did a little hook. So you want to be careful that you don't go too far. But you want it does help a little bit to have a little bit of more of that curve in there. So there you go. So I'm going to do the same thing for this side. So kind of curve it. So it's more straight coming out of that second to last keyframe, and then the last keyframe it's much more flat. It means it'll ease into that ending there. If we want to play this, and it looks like I still have a little bit of a curve in there from somewhere. Gotta be very careful when you do these, but it is nice. You just gotta be careful not to go too far. All right, double check these and make sure these are flat again, and then rewind and play. And if I give up, I can just go back and it's still curving. Looks like it's curving on. Again, this is where you use the F key. You select these frames and hit the F key. You can come in here and adjust these a little bit more. Oops, I didn't have the handle there. There we go. And there we go. And let's rewind and play. There we go. So you can see it kind of easing out. And if you're having a hard time, you can always come back and just linear these back out, and it still look pretty good, and it looks pretty good. Okay, so you can try those out. This is definitely better when you have a larger area to work with. My curve is kind of tight. It's not going too far, but I mean it does work. All right, so I have this in there, and let me take one quick look here. Yeah, we'll say it's done. So like I said, it comes in, it gets there faster, and then it gets speed off of that bumper, and then it's going to ease to a stop. So now that is, like I said, that's the pass that I really recommend that you get to before you even bother to even touch the blue ones. Don't even touch the blue ones until you've gotten to that point, because you don't know. Like I said, you saw me moving those keyframes around, so it was hitting these blue ones in different places. If you spend a bunch of time animating the blue one first, and then you suddenly then you come back and change the timing on the red one, then it's a lot. It's more work. It's not a whole bunch of work. You definitely can do it. You just want to try to avoid that as much as possible. All right, so I'm going to come in here now, and I'm going to go ahead and start with this puck right here because this one's simpler. I'm just going to have this one get hit, and I don't think I'm going to have it hit the wall. I think I'm just going to have it get very close to hitting the wall, and then so this one's the simplest of all four pucks here. So I'm going to start with this one here. Technically, you can start with any one you want at this point, because you have the timing of the contacts semi-locked down. So I mean, hopefully, but now we can go to that where it gets hit, select the blue puck, and I can key this one. And if I was gonna hit the wall, I would need a key from here, key from where it hits the wall, key from where it bounces off. Rewind. I'm just gonna rewind a bit, play. Seeing how fast it hits it. It hits it pretty fast, actually. I was gonna try to avoid hitting the wall, but we'll see. I'll see what it looks like first without hitting the wall. Right here. And I'll go ahead and with the blue puck selected, again, just your time, and I'm just matching where the puck hits. Shift W. And I'm gonna go X amount of distance, kind of see where it's hitting. Looks like it's kind of hitting it over here, so it's probably gonna go kind of more this direction. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hit Shift W. And I know already off the top of my head that this timing is probably way too fast, but that's okay. We're trying to get the puck keyframes locked in. Again, if I was going to hit the wall, I would need 3. One starting, one hitting the wall, one bouncing off. But I'm going to try to see what it looks like with just the 2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on these keyframes. I'm going to throw out the translate Ys. You will do this for every single puck, at least if you follow exactly what I'm doing, because I do not plan on having the pucks get airborne. If you did, then you might want to leave these, but I do not plan on that. So I'm going to just select those green ones and just delete key to keep this a little cleaner. This is very formulaic in this regards, but I'm going to go ahead and just grab these tangents linear. And then remember the last frames on these will most likely be flats because they're going to ease out. So your first frame and all other frames most likely will be linears, but your last one will be flat. So select them all, usually do linear, then go select the last one and do flat. And if I rewind and play this, it's probably going to be too fast. But you can see, yeah, way too fast. Way too fast. So obviously that doesn't make any sense. This puck, it cannot be faster than, at the time than the red puck because it's what's transferring all its energy. So it becomes a bit of a guessing game. Or other thing you can do is you can have the distance be less, which honestly probably would be the case. I can do a little bit of both. Maybe I'll come back and bring this a little closer. Shift W. So I overwrote those keyframes. I was on that keyframe when I did it. And then rewind and play. Okay, it's still too fast, but I like the distance it's going. And then after that, it's just really, again, if you want to slow these down, these need to be farther apart. So I'm going to select these back ones because I can't change the front ones because that's when it's getting hit. But I have tons of freedom on where the second set are. So I'm just going to make these much slower. I'll just start at, 40. There we go. And then rewind and play. Boom, boom, boom. All right, take a look again. Let's clearly go through again. Still a bit on the fast side, I think, but let me double check. Yeah, it's still a bit on the fast side. So I'm going to slow these down a little bit more. Do 46. Rewind and play. You can see that looks pretty good. I think it's going a little slow of a start. Stop this. I'm going to make sure my front ones are linear again. I'll give it 2 frames back, so split the difference. There you go. You can kind of see it coming along. I think, ironically, this one needs to slow down on the second and third frame as I keep watching it. And this you can do this, especially since I haven't animated these blue ones. But you want to try to minimize that. But it's not a perfect. You're not going to be perfect. It's very hard, obviously. Slow these down a bit. I think I want to slow it down after that hit because now that I'm seeing kind of all work together, I'm noticing it more. It's a little floaty, meaning it's if this one ended so fast, it shouldn't float like that to the other one. I do like the speed. Honestly, I feel like I should bring this one closer to it, and slow it down some more, which I could do. So I could bring this one a little bit closer. Granted, it's going to mess up my frames, but that's okay. I think this will be better in the long run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in wherever that one frame was. It's right here. I'm going to move this to be right here instead, and then overwrite that keyframe. So again, I'm moving to that frame and overwriting it, and then make sure you throw out the Y if you're staying to that. And then again, this will mess up your timing a little bit, so you have to sometimes you have to come back in and see. I like that. I'm much better myself. Okay. I don't think this one should go as far after that hit either. So you can see I'm actually having quite a bit of mistakes on, and this is good because like I said, you guys can see the process here. I'm going to go to the very last frame. And I went too far. There we go. I'm going to have it not go as far. And then I'm going to go select that. I want that frame. Make sure you select these. I'm just double checking to make sure these are flat on the end. They are. All right, rewind and play as it goes. All right, so get some speed and then kind of knocks it back and then moves it. All right, that's looking pretty good so far. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this one over here first. I want to save those last two for the end. So it gets hit right about here. I'm going to select this keyframe, and I'm going to Shift W, and then I'm going to go ahead and move it, I don't know, 30 or so frames, to frame 30, I mean, in my case, my example. Yours, of course, will be different. And then I'm going to hit Shift W, and then it's going to bounce off this thing. And sure, we'll have it hit the wall. Shift W, and then I'm going to go a little bit more, and then kind of come to a stop here. Shift W. And I'm just get the F key here to frame these. I'm going to make them linear because I find it easier to read my timing as linear. Get rid of all these Y's. Rewind and play. And it's going to be, that's pretty good actually. Pretty good guessing there. So let me go back through. Again, if you want to preview a certain different range, you can always grab your range slider and preview less. So I'm going to preview this down here. All right, so I think the second to third frame is a little too fast, but not terrible off. So I'm going to give a little more time there. Rewind and play. Actually, I think it was better before. Because again, we want to, if we're going to do something, you want to exaggerate it. Let's check. Problems I'm creating. I like it. I like what it's doing there, but I didn't make this bumper hit so much. And this is where I said you want to really try to avoid doing this, but you can see it's going to happen. So where does this happen? It happens between there and there. So again, this is easy fix. We want to make this tighter, shorter. I like how that is responding though. It's like super quick. So it's boom, boom, trying to make them match now. Okay, I think the second frame, and this is actually, I'm having a lot of issues with this one. Because I really should have did my first timing better, and you can see the result. And for me, I have more experience, so it's not so bad, but this should be faster. This should be faster, which means this one should be faster. Play. Okay. And this is part of animation. Rewind and play. So my blue one's going to be slightly off now. You can see it's getting hit at a different time, but I'm trying to get my timing back the way I want. All right. So let's go ahead and grab that blue one. It's getting hit. Should be getting hit right. What? Where does it change directions? It's getting hit 22. So these needs to be moved back to 22. So I just went to the translate tool, selected these, and dragged them back. And that's what you'll have to do if you don't do your block in correctly. You'll have to move them around, which isn't the end of the world. You saw me just do it right there. Boom, boom. It's definitely responding more. Maybe I should. Red one. I'm going to come over here and take these down a bit, a couple frames, because I'm trying to speed up between here and here. And this is where you're going to be spending most of your time, is coming through here and in working on your pacing. All right. Got this blue one. I want to adjust this one as well. I think that's too fast between here and here, so let's slow this down just a couple frames. I think I did this once already, but let's try it again. I still want to exaggerate, but I'm trying to get the speed a little bit more close. I think that's a little bit closer to each other. I'm looking at the bounce between here and here off them, that they should be roughly about even. Granted, if it always depends on which one's getting hit harder. You could make the argument this one would be harder because this should be faster, and actually it should be faster at the very beginning. So let's grab all these. So I made this farther apart, but then I'm going to grab all these and tighten this up a bit. A little bit more, couple more frames. Rewind and play. still not happy with how slow this is getting to here. Which thankfully I haven't animated any of that yet, so I can move these back frames over more. Rewind, play. Starting to look better. Okay. And I actually didn't ever come in here, and at least I don't think it did. I didn't make these last frames flat, which that'll help. So flat on those last frames. And then come in here and let's rewind and play. Play. Boom, boom. Like that. Looking pretty good. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reposition these because I don't like the angle. There's nothing wrong with it, but the angle is definitely not correct because it's definitely getting hit from the side. This would fly this way, which this needs to be more over here now, I think. So it gets hit at right here, 48. I'm going to animate this one. So I'm going to go Shift W. I'm going to go, I don't know, 454, which might be too slow, but we'll see. I'm going to hit this, Shift W, and then I'm going to do a bounce off, maybe like over here, and then it's going to come to a stop. So those 3 frames. Delete these Ys, make these all linear, make the last ones flat. Almost guarantee you that that's what's going to be for this exercise. And then you can tweak as needed. I'm going to hit play. Definitely too fast coming out of the gate. Well, maybe not, because actually it's going to right off that bumper. I think I'm going to slow down a little bit. Couple frames. So you grab that second and third one, moved them over 2 frames. And this last frame needs to go way farther. All right, rewind to play. I'm going to decrease my preview range. There we go. And then come over here. We'll call that good. This gets hit at this frame. I'm just basically dragging until it gets hit. Gets hit right here. This one's going to be very easy. It's going to be Shift W and then move the time. I'll just say 70. And I'll drag it a little bit distance and hit Shift W. I'm going to select these and hit delete. Let translate Ys. Make these first 2 linear. And these last 2 flat, which they already are, but just to be safe, last 2 flat. Boom, like that. And then check the timing on these ones. Play. Not too fast. Just a little bit. So all I need to do that, if it's too fast, again, we're going to add some more distance. I can't mess with the first ones because that's the point of contact. But the last ones I can stretch out. Or I can shorten the distance that this goes. And that would be me just moving to that keyframe and just physically moving this and then overriding the key. Looking. Probably this one should go a little bit farther. This one before it, which thankfully doesn't affect it. That one looks pretty good. I'm kind of looking at how far they get hit. Now this would, how far they would go at the very end would be dependent on the surface it's on. I'm not really doing anything fancy like ice or anything, so I'm not going to have them be super floaty. So I'm just going to kind of eyeballing this right now to see where I want this to go. I think it might be fine. I mean, I would probably definitely make this one go a little bit further, maybe this one a little bit shorter, but I think this is pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and make this one a little bit shorter. Just kind of make it not go as far. Again, I'm just going to that keyframe. I'm on that keyframe, and then I'm overriding its position. Shift W. And then throw out the translate Ys because I don't want them. Okay, rewind and play. All right, looks pretty good. All right, so let's do the bumpers now. So the bumpers, obviously, because it's like I said, I'm doing that kind of arcadey bumper thing. This is going to do something when this gets hit. So looks like one more frame. Looks like I was slightly off. Here, you know what? Just to make things simple, I'm going to move this a little bit closer. Remember, if you're working with groups, you select any one piece of the group, hit the up arrow on your keyboard to get the whole group, if that is an issue. But it looks like I missed, technically never actually made contact. I'm just going to move this closer. That's easier. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and keyframe this. And I'm only going to keyframe, in my case, the rubber, because it's two different objects. And then I put them in a group. So I'm just going to keyframe the rubber. Again, if you didn't freeze transformations, make sure you freeze transformations on your objects. I think you find it a lot easier, especially if you're going to do scale or rotate. In this exercise, you're probably not going to freeze translate at all. But if you have some rotation on something or scale on something, you should freeze it to be zeros and ones. It'll make your life easier, especially so that way you can animate, especially scale, animate it in thinking terms of percentages here, 1 being 100%. So if you do have different values in here, before you start animating, just select these keys, right click, and go freeze, scale. Rotate probably won't be an issue, but freezing the scale will probably make your life easier, and I'll show you. So in frame 26, I'm going to do Shift R because I'm doing scale. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, I don't know, two frames or 4 frames. And then I'm going to make these all get a little bit smaller. And I'm going to choose even numbers only because I plan on doing the exact same animation on the other side. And I just want to have them nice and handy. I tend to like to do like animations like this, even numbers. I'm going to choose 0.85. And then go ahead and hit Shift R again. And then I'm going to go ahead and move a couple more frames. I have no idea, I'm guessing. And I'm going to make these all like 1.1, so 10% bigger. It's pretty big. And then I'm going to do Shift R. So I should Shift E by accident. Shift R. And then I'm going to go a couple more frames, and then I'm going to get these all back to 1. And then hit Shift R. So you'll have a frame that's your start frame when it first makes contact, and then in my case I'm making it get smaller. And then what's going to happen is, let me select this and hit the F key because it looks like I messed up here. Looks like I accidentally did not make these bigger. So you can see, that's what I said, you don't even know the values, but I knew this was wrong because this should go up. It should be bigger. So I made a mistake somewhere. I'm going to make these 1.1 and then key them. Probably didn't key them. And then it's going to go back down to 1. So in this case, it's 1.85, 1.1, 1. All right, I'm just going to make these all linear. And they're all right on top of each other, in case you're wondering where these all are. They're all right on top of each other. I'm going to go ahead and make these all linear. This is a very quick, cartoony, so it should be snappy. If anything, I might need to make this faster. Let's find out. And then we're going to rewind and play. Yeah, it's way too slow. So we're going to make this a little more poppy. So I'm gonna grab these, and what am I, roughly 6 fix? Let's go let's go 2. I'm gonna do these all like 2 keyframes apart. 1, 2. Okay, let's rewind this and hit play. Much better, much better. Boom. Kind of hits them and kind of goes off to the side. I like that much better. So again, exaggeration really comes into play. Now, cool thing here is that, yeah, I originally didn't make these so I could copy and paste them, but you know what? I'm going to do something even lazier, which is lazy is good, is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this object, and I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to duplicate with its animation. The animation will be in the wrong spot, but that's easy to change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this object by going Edit, Duplicate Special, Option Box. Option box is a little box to the right. Whenever we say anything about option box, it's to the right. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to check this box, duplicate input graph. This will include the animation. And hit duplicate special. And you see it's created another one here. And I'm just going to move this. And if you want, you can tap the space bar and go to your 4 view. I'm going to hit top view here, hit the F key. I'm just going to, because I need it to be in the exact same spot. I'm just going to eyeball it. There are other ways of doing this, but eyeballing will be fine here. And I'm going to delete the old one. All right, so I have 2 in here. And what you'll see is it should have the animation. If I go to, in my case, it was on rubber here. And there it is. It's going to be in the wrong place. It's going to be at the same time. But that can be easily moved. So just check, confirm. There they go. They both animated it. But when does this actually get hit? It gets hit at roughly, what, 43? 42? 43. Looks like 43. So I need this first frame to be at frame 43. We could move them in here. I tend to like to move things in here, though. So I'm just going to grab it here. And you can see there's the yellow line showing where I'm supposed to be. And I'm just going to middle mouse drag. And again, be on the move tool. Move them to there. And now they're on frame, starts at frame 43. Rewind. Let's get a little bit better position here to see them from. And click off of that so I can just have everything kind of there. It's a little bit smaller. All right, let's take a look here. Play. Boom, 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 boom. Looks pretty good. I mean, I would definitely spend some more time refining this. I think this is first one's still a little bit too slow off the mark. I think they should go a little bit faster off the bounce, but that's okay. This is too slow. I could come in here and definitely, that one's easy. So we're going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to actually have this go farther. I'm going to have it get all the way over here, I think. And then hit Shift W. And then go get, again, let's try to go to this one. Because I think it's not going far enough. Let's say too far. Too far. Again, it can be a combination of both. You need to slow it down some too. So I'm just going in there and moving it out some. Ugh. I think I'm actually making it look worse. That does tend to happen if you get too mess with it. Maybe not as far as I went. Went a little too far. Okay. Grab that one, delete that one. Let's take a look again. And you can see it going through there. So yeah, I mean, it's got some flaws, but for our exercise here, I think this is pretty good for you guys. Obviously, I hope you guys spend a bit more time refining because that's where it is. But we've gotten basically all our checks, our check boxes checked here. We just got to refine them as we go. And ideally, what you should do is you should take a little more time and refine as you go. Like I said, working in passes, it'll save you time in the long run. So what you would do at this point is, let's say it's done, or maybe you need to get it approved. You would want to render it. And the render I'm going to show you is meant more for like you're still in production kind of rendering right now. You're not doing finalized renders that you would show like a public or like a consumer audience or something like that. I'm going to show you how to do a production-based render when you would show your team and whatnot. I'm pulling this out to close this. You would show your team. We call these play blasts. What play blasts are, they're not the prettiest renders, and then nor are they like the most efficient either, but they're very quick and easy to do. It only take a few minutes, not even a few minutes. A few minutes to set up and render. So they're very quick, and they're meant to show people that don't have Autodesk a project very quickly. So you can email it to someone or put it on some sort of chat service and, hey, what do you think? Oh, I think this should be faster here, and so on and so forth. So all you have to do is position your camera. What this does, Play Blast Render is going to render out the hardware render camera. So whatever you have selected, whatever is showing here is going to render in the main view here. So for example, if I have this checked, it's going to keep that checked and render that with it. It's going to render the lights in there by default. So what I generally recommend that you do is you go into the lighting settings and turn off your light. Not lighting's under show, lights, and you can check this box off. If you have deformers, you can check off the box here. This will keep the deformer. They will still work. It's turning off the handles and the things that you use to grab for them to move them around. So there we go. Please note you can still get them inside your outliner. No, not a problem. Just got to memorize that that's there because again, let it come back into the show and turn them off. And I believe this setting does save, so you have to go in there and turn them off back on future projects. Okay, so you could get this view however you want it to look. Spend some time making this look as nice as you can. Honestly, it will not be as nice as a full-blown render, but you know, you want it to be nice, right? And then, you know, position your camera wherever you want it to be. In this example, I'm not animating. You're not gonna see where the first puck comes from. So this is a pretty good view. I like this angle. And what I'll do is I'll go up to Windows, Play Blast, Option Box. I'm gonna reset my settings so they match yours. Edit, reset setting. And then before you animate, and actually I made this mistake, so I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna want to make my frame range match whatever I want to show. So there's tons of frames in here I didn't need. So I'm gonna not preview as many. It looks like I don't need anything after, basically after like 80. So I'm just gonna go to 100 and stop there, and I'll play it back just to see if this is still still too much dead space at the end, dead time at the end. I think it's pretty good. So I'm only previewing 100 here. So there we go. You can also change this one, either one of these ones. This is, the playback range or the total animation. Technically, my animation is at 100, so I'm just going to do that. But it would have been fine with me having 100 in the first one. It's this time slider range, not the entire animation. That's what a play blast looks at least. All right, so I'm going to make these both 100 in my case. Yours, of course, will be different. Go back to Windows, Play Blast, Option Box. And then again, my settings are already reset. That's what time slider is. If you want a hard code right in that time in here, you can change it to start in. I usually leave it on time slider. If you're on a Mac, I'm going to skip past these. You don't need them. You can turn off show ornaments if you want. That should turn off some things like the grid. Actually, you know what? We'll be sure to turn off the grid. I didn't even think about that. The grid is right here. Mine's hidden pretty well. It's hard to see. But if your grid's obvious, you can come up to show grid right here and turn off the grid as well. Let me go back to my view. There we go. Okay, now we're ready. Oh, one more thing. Click off everything. All right, there we go. So now we go to Windows, Play Blast. Again, if your format is AVI, if you're on a PC by default, if you're on a Mac, it's going to be a movie. Either one's fine. I don't think Macs have encoding listed. If they do, feel free to use them. Encoding will make the file size smaller. I tend to use IYUV. If you're more familiar with codecs, feel free to use whichever one that is appropriate. I'm just not that knowledgeable of codecs, so I just use the first one to make the file size smaller. Scale, this is going to take the resolution of the window, because that's what display size means from window, and it's going to basically make this half as big. You can go in here and change it from like the camera settings or actually custom make ones, but playblasts are meant to be quick. Don't fret it. Just from Windows fine, half scale. You don't need to mess with the frame padding at all. The only other thing I change here is I do save it to a file. It's nice to have files, but default we can do this. It just kind of keeps it in the background memory, and when you shut down it would delete it for you. But I actually want to save this as a file, so I'm going to click on Save on File. And then I'm going to, instead of renaming it, I'm just going to click on Browse, because you can rename it there. Choose a location, choose a name. Play Blast Test, or whatever you want to call it. And hit Save. And you can see once I do that, it now has a path as well as a name. And then you hit Play Blast. And this will render out, and as soon as it's done, it pops up. It opens it by default in your viewer of the, whatever, your hardware is. And it goes through and plays. So you can see, boom, boom, boom. I should have turned off hide ornaments. I did not, but that's what those would have been helped you with. So you can see it's going there. Boom, boom. It looks pretty good. There's some problems. You can, your team will like, hey, speed this up here, slow this down here. That's what it's for. Try different angles, whatever you wanted to do. That's what the play blasts are meant to be quick, so that way you can get that immediate feedback on doing that. So, that's our play blast, and here's your animation. So if you want to maybe look at it from a different angle, you can say, hey, what about A or B? Do different play blast if you want to. They're meant to be quick and easy to do. Key elements, again, take away from this lecture is work in passes. Edit in the graph editor. It's just faster than you can do a lot of these same things using cut and paste on the timeline.
just definitely not as fast. So graph editor will definitely save you time there. And don't forget your tangents, make them match what you're trying to go for. And like I said, in this case, most of them will be linear, but the very ends will be flats as the eases out. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Stay tuned for more videos. Keep on creating with Maya and have a great day.